Welcome to Detective Reddington's office. Take a seat and listen to this story. It will be interesting. I always trusted her. 9 years of marriage, 9 years I thought were stable, honest, even loving. But everything changed in an instant, without any dramatic scenes. No yelling or shocking confessions. It started with a small shift in her behavior, something I wouldn't have noticed before. I sensed it instinctively, like a hunter sniffing prey. There was a faint scent in the air, invisible but undeniable. After so many years together, suddenly something was wrong. Emily began spending more time with her younger brother, Bill. He was 6 years younger, athletic, always seemed like the typical jock to me. Always smiling, always too confident. It didn't bother me before. Everyone knew he was in great shape. Big muscles, perfect posture. Women always admired him. But he was her brother, so I never thought of him in that context. Not until recently. Over the past few weeks, their meetings started to seem strange. Every time he came over, her behavior changed. She started wearing shorter skirts, choosing clothes that emphasized her figure. Her laughter seemed unnatural, too loud, too fake. She leaned in too close, laughed at every joke he made. And every time he was around, I could see her eyes fixated on his athletic body, as if she couldn't look away. The first real suspicion hit me one evening when I came home early from work. Emily was in the kitchen, and Bill was lounging on a chair like he owned the place. She was cooking something for him, and her movements were too graceful, as if she was trying to impress. She had even changed her hairstyle that day. Her hair was styled perfectly, like she was going on a date. I asked what was going on, but she just brushed it off, saying she wanted a change. Bill gave me a look I'll never forget. It wasn't the look of a brother, not the look of a guy visiting his sister for dinner. His eyes were challenging me, challenging my place in this house, my role as her husband. I felt a knot in my stomach. Something was definitely wrong. Since that day, I couldn't stop thinking about the way they interacted. Bill and Emily had always been close, but what I saw recently was something different. If I'd seen them on the street, not knowing who they were, I'd have thought they were a couple. She didn't look at him like a brother anymore. Emily had always been attractive, but recently she had started taking extra care of her appearance. I noticed how much more time she spent in front of the mirror, choosing outfits that highlighted her curves, and she often looked at herself as if she was evaluating her appearance for the first time. The most obvious change was how she dressed when Bill came over. Shorter skirts, more revealing tops. This wasn't the kind of outfit she'd wear before when they met as siblings. And he responded to her. Bill had always had a physical advantage. Tall, well-built, muscles showing through his shirt. But that wasn't what bothered me the most. His confidence had turned into something more. He knew women found him attractive. And judging by the way Emily looked at him, he liked it. One evening, while I sat in the living room pretending to work, I overheard them laughing in the kitchen. Their laughter was too loud, too easy. I listened to every word, every movement in that room. Bill joked about his workouts, about how his physique got women's attention, and I heard Emily respond with lighthearted compliments. She leaned in too close, as I could see from the reflection in the glass door of the cabinet. "This is how you should look if you want to keep a girl," he said, patting his muscles, and I heard Emily snicker. "Not everyone can boast about that," she replied, and I felt my fingers involuntarily tighten around my laptop. I tried not to react, tried to keep calm, but something inside me was boiling. Their conversations became more and more suggestive. Bill openly bragged about his body, and Emily didn't hide her admiration. She looked at him like he was a man, not her brother. I could see it in her eyes, and it tore me apart inside. That evening, I decided I couldn't just be a passive observer anymore. I knew I had to act, but not like a weakling. I was going to gather all the evidence before confronting them. My first thought was to talk to her, to put her in her place, but I held back. I needed to find out how deep this went before making my move. I started noticing more little things that I hadn't paid attention to before. When I came home from work, their conversations would stop abruptly as soon as I walked in the door. They always seemed too relaxed, like they were trying to hide something. Her eyes didn't meet mine the way they used to, Every touch between them was too intimate. One day, I found them sitting in the living room together. Bill was telling another story about the gym, and his hand rested casually on Emily's knee. She didn't move it away, didn't pull back. Her eyes were locked on him. They had forgotten I was even in the room, and that was my first real confirmation. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I saw her desire for him. It wasn't just a physical reaction. It was passion. But I decided I'd play it smart. I wouldn't let my emotions take over. No one was going to make me look pathetic. If they thought they could play me, they hadn't met the real me yet. I would play their game, but by my own rules. After that evening, I couldn't look at them the same way anymore. Every glance between them seemed filled with hidden meaning. But I kept myself in check, not showing my suspicions. I had to move quietly without raising any alarms. Every time Bill came over, I pretended to be busy with work or something else, but my eyes and ears were focused entirely on them. I soon started looking for opportunities to eavesdrop on their conversations. I used every chance to hear more, to find real proof of my suspicions. They spoke quietly, but I found ways to get closer to their talks. One evening, when I came home earlier than they expected, I found them in the backyard. Emily was sitting on the bench, and Bill was standing in front of her. Too close. They didn't hear me approach. I hid behind the bushes and listened. "I still can't believe you can stay in such good shape," Emily said, her voice full of admiration. "Not everyone can look so convincing." Bill chuckled. His laugh was low and confident. "You know, I'll always be like this for you." I heard Emily laugh softly, and it made me clench my fists. I couldn't doubt it any longer. This wasn't just admiration. This was real, and I couldn't stand by anymore. I went back into the house before they noticed me. More and more evidence was piling up in front of me, but it still wasn't enough. I decided it was time for more decisive action. The next day, I decided to be even more careful. Everything I had seen and heard so far was important, but I needed something concrete. I began paying more attention to Emily's phone. She never left it unattended, always taking it with her, even when she went to another room. That was my first clue. I knew the answers were there, in those messages she carefully hid. That evening, I finally got the moment I had been waiting for. Emily left her phone on the kitchen counter when she rushed to the bathroom. This was my only chance. I walked to the counter, my heart racing, but I kept calm. The phone was locked, and I didn't know her password. But one message flashed on the screen, the sender's name, Bill. I felt a rush in my chest. Without hesitation, I read it. "You were amazing last time. I can't stop thinking about you." That was enough for me to understand I was on the right path. This wasn't just flirting anymore. It had gone further. I glanced up at the stairs, listening to the sound of the shower, and tried unlocking the phone. No luck. All I could do was remember what I had seen. When Emily came back, I was already sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV. I noticed how she saw her phone and quickly picked it up. Her eyes scanned the screen, and I could see her expression change. She tensed up, but tried to hide it. She didn't know that I had seen the message. I didn't say a word. I watched her as she tried to act casual. Her smile seemed fake, but I gave away nothing. Now I knew for sure. Something was happening between them, and it couldn't be ignored. But I still remained calm. I needed a plan, and I was already working on it. The next morning, I decided to take the day off and stay home. Emily seemed a little surprised that I wasn't going to work, but she didn't ask any questions. As usual, she looked perfect. It was as if she was getting ready for a meeting, even though her schedule didn't include anything special. I couldn't help but notice how carefully she chose her outfit, especially picking a dress that emphasized her figure. I watched as she got ready, but to avoid raising suspicion, I acted like everything was normal. However, my mind was focused on one thing: what were they planning today? After she left, I quickly got in my car and followed her. She stopped by Bill's place, just as I expected. They greeted each other, hugging longer than usual. I stayed at a distance, in the shadows, hidden so they couldn't see me. Everything looked like a regular sibling meeting, if I hadn't already known better. I had a feeling something more was going to happen that day. They got into Bill's car and drove off. I followed them at a safe distance to avoid being spotted. They stopped at a small house on the outskirts of town. I parked a little further away and walked up on foot, hiding behind some bushes near the windows. The lights inside were dim, and through the sheer curtains, I could only see silhouettes. But that was enough. Their movements were slow. Then I saw her approach him and place her hands on his chest. I bit my lip to keep from making a sound. Bill lowered his hands to her waist, and Emily leaned in and kissed him. This was the moment I had been waiting for. They weren't hiding anything anymore. This wasn't just sibling affection. This was real betrayal. Their silhouettes moved closer, and I saw his hands slide over her body as she stepped back and sat down on the couch. They were talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I just watched as she sat on the couch, and he stood before her, his hands running down her thighs. Then they embraced again, this time even more intimately. I stood outside the window holding my breath. They had no idea I was watching their every move. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was proof of what I had been preparing for. But now my anger became cold and calculating. I came home late that night while they were still together. Emily didn't come back until the next morning. She didn't even try to explain where she had been. She avoided the topic, thinking I was clueless. But she was wrong. The next week, I decided to act even more decisively. I installed software on my computer that allowed me to see all her messages. Every time I saw her texting Bill, my patience grew thinner. I saw how he sent her emojis, comments about her body, and eventually direct hints about their meetings. She replied with short phrases, but her responses said more than enough. But the real blow came when I found a video they hadn't had time to delete from her phone. She had recorded them together. At first, I thought it was just regular moments, but then I realized it was a recording of their intimate encounters. My mind froze for a second as I watched the screen. Bill used his physical advantage, his strong arms wrapping around her body, and she gave in to his every move. Everything was so obvious, so painfully clear. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. She had betrayed me with the person closest to her. My stomach twisted in anger, but I kept control. I knew that in this moment, I was moving into the next phase of my plan. After seeing that video, I knew there was no turning back. I couldn't let them think they had one. I started crafting a plan to make the exposure not just painful, but humiliating for both of them. I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions in front of everyone. My first step was gathering all the evidence. I saved every message, every photo, every video, every moment that proved their affair. I prepared it all as my trump card. Then I started thinking about how to make it public. I decided to throw a party, invite all our friends and family. This would be the moment they'd be humiliated. I'd make sure everyone saw the truth, that they couldn't hide behind lies or excuses. But until that day, I acted like nothing was wrong. I maintained the usual routine, giving them a false sense of security. Now, it wasn't just about exposing Emily. It was about making her realize what she had lost and who she had betrayed. I wouldn't let them walk away unscathed. My revenge wasn't just an emotional act. It was a strategy that would strike when they least expected it. As I waited for the moment of exposure, I discovered something new in myself. Dark, biting humor that helped me stay calm. My anger, instead of consuming me, became cold and calculated. I started seeing the whole situation as a movie, where I was the director, and Emily and Bill were just actors in my production. They were so sure I didn't know. Their naive smiles and innocent glances only fueled my satisfaction. They thought I was still the same simple, predictable John, who saw nothing. But now I was controlling every step they took. The irony was that Emily continued to play the role of the perfect wife. She tried to seem attentive and caring, making me my favorite breakfast, asking about work. And every time she did something like that, I smiled to myself, "Oh, darling, how sweetly you play. Too bad the ending will be bitter for you." When I planned the party, her behavior became even more predictable. She was excited, thinking it was just another friendly gathering. She had no idea that this party would be the final chord of our marriage. "What, John? You decided to throw a party?" she asked with a slight surprise in her voice. I looked at her, barely holding back my laughter. "Yeah, I think it's going to be an unforgettable evening," I replied, and I truly meant it. I could already imagine how Emily's face would change during the party, as everyone saw the truth. That thought gave me immense satisfaction. I had become the spectator of my own show, and it was the best show of my life. The night of the party arrived, and everything was ready. Friends started gathering, the atmosphere was light, but tense for me. I kept all my emotions under control. Emily was laughing and chatting with guests, unaware that her world was about to crumble. I decided to talk to her alone before making my move. I needed to hear her excuses, her reaction to everything I was about to lay out in front of everyone. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, as we stepped into a separate room. She was surprised, but not afraid. She probably thought it was just another pointless discussion about our routine. But I was about to break that script. "Are you hiding something from me?" I started, looking her directly in the eyes. She tensed immediately. "What do you mean?" She tried to act calm, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. I know about you and Bill," I said coldly. Her eyes widened and she stepped back. Her face instantly changed. She was no longer confident. Now she was cornered, and it showed in every detail of her expression. "John, it's not what you think," she started, but I raised my hand to stop her. "It's exactly what I think. I know everything. And tonight, you're going to know what true humiliation feels like." My words were calm, but with each passing second, I could see her world falling apart. Emily no longer tried to play her part. Her eyes filled with fear. She realized I knew more than she ever expected. After that conversation, I left her alone to process her defeat. I knew she needed a few minutes to collect her thoughts before walking into the room where I was about to make the public reveal. In the meantime, I approached Bill. He was smiling, as always, acting like nothing was wrong. He had no idea that this evening would be his downfall. "Bill, can we talk?" I asked, looking straight at him. He agreed without a hint of suspicion, thinking I knew nothing about his affair with Emily. When we stepped out onto the terrace, I didn't let him speak first. "I know about you and Emily," I said, calmly watching as his smile slowly disappeared. He wanted to say something to justify himself, but I didn't give him the chance. "You thought I wouldn't notice? You thought you could just walk into my life and destroy it? Tonight, you're going to learn what true fear feels like," I continued. Bill's face changed. His once confident expression vanished, and now he looked like a cornered animal. He realized I wasn't bluffing. "John, it was just physical," he started, but I cut him off. "Physical or not, you betrayed me, and I'm not letting you both walk away from this." When everyone gathered in the living room, the atmosphere was festive. Emily was laughing, talking to friends, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, and now it was here. I picked up the remote, the room filled with chatter and drinks clinking. "Everyone, I've got a little something prepared for you," I said, holding back a smirk. I pressed the button, and the TV lit up. For a few moments, the screen showed a black image. Then the video began to play. The room fell silent as the first few frames appeared. It was Emily and Bill, caught in a moment far too intimate for siblings. Gasps filled the room as the images became clearer. There was no mistaking it now. The footage showed them together, too close, too familiar. Bill's hands on Emily's body, her response, their laughter. It all played out in front of our friends and family. Every whispered secret, every stolen glance, all exposed in the open. Emily's face went pale as the realization hit her. She turned to me, her mouth slightly open, but no words came out. She tried to move, to leave the room, but I stepped in front of her. "No, you're going to stay and watch," I said calmly. I wasn't angry. I was in complete control. The guests were frozen in shock. Friends, co-workers, even some of her family members, all sat in stunned silence, unsure what to do or say. The laughter and conversation from earlier had completely disappeared. Now there was only the raw, naked truth. Bill, standing across the room, looked like a deer caught in the headlights. He avoided everyone's eyes. His usual confident grin wiped away, replaced by panic. He shifted uncomfortably, but he knew there was no escape from this. Everyone was seeing him for what he truly was. Emily tried to plead with me in a whisper. "John, please, we can talk about this later," she begged, her voice shaking. But I wasn't interested in private conversations anymore. "You think I didn't know? I've known everything for weeks," I said, just loud enough for the closest people to hear. "This is what betrayal looks like. I hope it was worth it." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but it didn't move me. This wasn't the time for sympathy. I had been waiting for this moment, for her to feel the humiliation she deserved. The party was over. The truth was out. And now she had to live with the consequences. As the room buzzed with murmurs and shock, I knew I had one more task left, to face Bill directly. I walked across the room, each step slow and deliberate. He stood by the door, his back turned, as if hoping he could just walk out unnoticed. But there was no way out for him now. "Bill," I said, my voice cold but steady. He froze for a moment, then turned to face me. His eyes were wide, full of fear. He was no longer the cocky, self-assured guy I had known. He was the image of guilt and shame. "We need to talk," I said, motioning for him to follow me outside. He hesitated but eventually followed me to the patio. The air outside was cool, but the tension between us was suffocating. Bill looked at me, and I could see him searching for words, trying to come up with something to justify what he'd done. "John, man, listen. It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he stammered. I stared at him, not blinking. "You think that makes it better? You think you can justify this?" I asked, my voice still calm, but laced with venom. He shook his head, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. It was physical, John. Nothing more. I didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. "Just physical, huh? You destroyed my marriage, Bill. You crossed a line you can't uncross. And you think saying it was just physical makes it okay?" Bill looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know what to say," he muttered. "That's right. There's nothing to say. Because no apology, no excuse, can fix this. You betrayed me," I said, stepping closer. "And now you're going to pay for it." I left him standing there, his face pale, his confidence shattered. Bill wasn't the powerful, attractive guy Emily had been so drawn to anymore. He was just a coward, and everyone saw it now. I walked back inside, where Emily was standing alone, trying to regain her composure. The guests were still murmuring, exchanging shocked glances. The video had finished playing, but the damage was done. No one would forget what they saw. I approached Emily one last time. She looked at me with tear-streaked cheeks, her eyes pleading. "John, I'm sorry. Please, we can fix this. I'll end it with Bill. I'll do anything. Just don't let this be the end." I stood in front of her, looking down at the woman I once loved. But that love was gone now, replaced by a cold emptiness. "There's no fixing this, Emily," I said quietly. "You chose him over me. You made your decision, and now you have to live with it." She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "You think I can ever trust you again? You think I can forget what you did? No, Emily. This is the end. You've lost everything." Her face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, sobbing. But it didn't affect me. I had no sympathy left to give. She wasn't my problem anymore. I turned to the guests who were still watching, unsure of what to do. "Thanks for coming, everyone. I think that's enough for tonight," I said, as calmly as if I were ending a regular party. Slowly, people began to leave, their expressions a mix of shock and pity. But none of that mattered to me. I had done what I came to do. Emily and Bill had been exposed. Their lies had been brought into the light, and now they would face the consequences alone. The next morning I called my lawyer. I had already prepared for this moment. Emily had no idea, but I was about to take everything. The house, the assets, everything we had built together. It was all going to be mine. I sat across from my lawyer as he reviewed the papers. "We're ready to file for divorce," he said, pushing the documents across the table for my signature. I signed them without hesitation. "Make sure she gets nothing," I said firmly. "I want her out of the house by the end of the week." He nodded, and I felt a sense of closure wash over me. This was the final piece of my revenge. Emily had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now she was going to lose everything because of it. By the end of the week, Emily was gone. The house was mine. Her reputation was ruined. Her life turned upside down. Bill had disappeared, too ashamed to face anyone. They had both gotten what they deserved. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I sat in the empty house, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had walked away from this stronger, not broken. I hadn't let them destroy me. In fact, I had destroyed them. There was no satisfaction in it, no real joy, but there was peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that justice has been served. Emily and Bill had thought they could betray me, that they could get away with it. But they were wrong. I stood up and looked out the window at the quiet street outside. Life was moving on, and so was I. I had a new beginning ahead of me, free from the lies and the betrayal. I had made sure they paid for what they did, and now it was time for me to leave it all behind. This was my story, and I had written the ending.